Steel.
I don't need a steel.
You might hang yourself with it.
Huh?
You might hang
What
yourself.
verse are we doing?
I mean, everyone gets a phone. Don't need a steel.
It is 33.
Am I the only person using the computer like this for class, so that everyone can see?
Navadwip is using it.
He gets phone too.
Don't
No, I'm
put me
just
on
saying
hot
for
seat.
class, I'm just wanting to,
Take that porcupine and throw it back to you.
where is everybody?
Take that porcupine and throw it back.
Because what do you do if somebody throws you a porcupine?
Yeah.
You get rid of it, and then you're not keeping
It's
it.
a really funny image.
Yeah.
Say it again, I didn't get it.
Well, if somebody throws you a porcupine, what are you gonna do?
Duck.
You're gonna throw that thing back as soon as you possibly
I
can.
don't
It's
know, I
only
don't
five
think
minutes.
so, I'm not touching
Someone
it.
said Lalit needs the computer.
Oh.
And then Thakur Haridaspuri said that no, he's also got a phone. And Lalit said, yeah, don't put me on the hot seat. Throw that porcupine right back to you.
I see. Well, we don't always have it. Okay, what's
You
this?
don't always get what you want, but sometimes
Yeah.
you get what you
Verse we're on. Wait, okay. I'm not good at kneeling. That doesn't work so good for this body.
What a beautiful day. That is a beautiful day.
Hmm. Which verse did you say it was?
33.
Okay, just right past. There we go. Oops.
Remember having enlarged it before after you had
Yep. Kind of difficult not sitting in front of it though.
I hear you.
Control.
Thank you.
Oh, this is awesome. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Reading from Srimad Bhagawatam, Canto 3, Chapter 11, Text 33. Evam vidhairaho ratrai.
Evam vidhairaho ratrai.
Kalagatyopalashitai.
Kalagatyopalashitai.
Apakshitamivasyapi.
Apakshitamivasyapi.
Paramayurvaya shatam.
Paramayurvaya shatam.
Evam vidhairaho ratrai.
Evam vidhairaho ratrai.
Kalagatyopalashitai.
Kalagatyopalashitai.
Apakshitamivasyapi.
Apakshitamivasyapi.
Paramayurvaya shatam.
Paramayurvaya shatam.
Apakshitamivasyapi Paramayurvayakshatam
Evam Vitayarahoratrai Alakatyo Kalakshitai Apakshitam Ivasyapi Paramahayurvayasatam
Evam Vidarahoratrai Kalavatyopalakshitai Apakshitam avasyapi Paramayurvayashatam Evam Vidarahoratrai Apakshitam Vidasyapi Paramayurvayasatam
Evam Vidarahoratrai Kalavatyopalakshitai
Evam, thus, Vidhai, by the process of Aha, days, Ratre, by nights, Kalagatya, advancement of time, Upalakshitai, by such symptoms, Apakshitam, declined, Eva, just like, Asya, his, Api, although, Paramaayu, duration of life, Vaya, years, Shatam, 100. Thus, the process of the exhaustion of the duration of life exists for every one of the living beings, including Lord Brahma. One's life endures for only 100 years in terms of the times and the different planets. Every living being lives for 100 years in terms of the times and different planets for different entities. These 100 years of life are not equal in every case. The longest duration of 100 years belongs to Brahma. But although the life of Brahma is very long, it expires in the course of time. Brahma is also afraid of his death. And thus, he performs devotional service to the Lord just to release himself from the clutches of illusory energy. Animals, of course, have no sense of responsibility, but even humans who have developed a sense of responsibility while away their valuable time without engaging in devotional service to the Lord. They live merrily unafraid of impending death. This is the madness of human society. The madman has no responsibility in life. Similarly, a human being who does not develop a sense of responsibility before he dies is no better than the madman who tries to enjoy material life very happily without concern for the future. It is necessary that every human being be responsible in preparing himself for the next life, even if he has a duration of life like that of Brahma, the greatest of all living creatures within the universe. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Immediately to mind with that last sentence of the purport was Loma Sharishi. He's described as having a body covered with hairs, and one hair falls out for each lifetime of Brahma. And when all of his hairs fall out, then he passes away. A lifetime that's too fantastically long to even conceive. And yet, when his disciples were telling him, oh, I think you're meditating outside, you're engaged in devotional service without proper attention to a bhajan facilities. And he said it's like building a castle on the sand where the waves are breaking. It'll be finished. I don't have time for that. It's temporary. This last line of the purport, even if he has a duration of life like that of Brahma, the greatest of all living creatures within the universe, still, he has to be responsible in preparing himself for the next life. Just like Loma Sharishi with such a fantastically long life, he says, no, I don't have time for any other occupation besides my devotional service. There's sort of a spectrum. One is materially mad, and one who is mad after Krishna. Kind of look the same in some funny ways. Both of them have no regard for, what's the word used? Responsibility. One has no regard for Krishna conscious spiritual responsibility, and the other has no regard for material responsibility. If someone were to tell Loma Sharishi, hey, I think you should get a job, I think you should pay rent, I think you should, just like, no, mad after Krishna. No sense of responsibility materially. And on the flip side, those who are mad after sense gratification, those who have made, as we heard in that purport a few weeks ago, griha vrata, those who have made a determination for sense gratification in this material world, griha medi, sukham hitacham, insignificant sense gratification. For that insignificant sense gratification, scratching an itch, little minor relief of disturbance, they're willing to forego their spiritual responsibilities and waste their life. Evam vidhayarvo ratrai kalagatyo palakshitai apalakshitam ivasyapi paramayarvaya shatam. Sanskrit's so wonderful, though I guess a lot of languages do this, but the conjugations allow you to instantly understand which words are connected. And it becomes so much easier to understand that when each word has the same original ending. Vidha, ratra, apalakshita. When all of those words have the same ending, then in the third case plural, which is instrumental, they all end in I-E, that A-I-H. The Visarga. Jiva Goswami changed the name Visarga to Vishnu Sarga. Jiva Goswami twisted all the grammar, made it Krishna conscious, following in the footsteps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose interest was to transform dry grammar into Krishna Kadam. That's the nature of the devotee, is to, like the touchstone, anything it touches turns to gold, transformed into spiritual energy, transforming material energy into spiritual energy, transforming lust into love. So, Vidhai, Ratrai, Apalakshitai. Therefore, you know these words are all connected. They're the instruments by the process of, by the passing of days and nights, by such symptoms, Upalakshitai. I said Alakshitai, it's Upalakshitai, by such symptoms. The process of exhaustion of the duration of life is taking place. So that's the subject, the duration of life. After 100 years, Shatam, Vaya Shatam. The process of the exhaustion of the duration of life exists for every one of the living beings, including Lord Brahma. It's amazing how there's sort of this relationship. Gita is very simple and condensed. It's like an amazing sort of cream that's easy to digest, but it packs such a punch. This description of Brahma's lifetime, Sahasra Yuga Paryantam, Ahar Yad Brahmano Vidu, Ratrin Yuga Sahasrantam, Devo Ratra Vidojana. The day and night of Lord Brahma's lifetime is calculated to be 1,000 ages for the day and 1,000 ages for the night. And he lives for 100 such days and nights, 100 years. 360 of that times 100. What a fantastic lifetime. Sahasra Yuga Paryantam. Oho. Ahar Yad Brahmano. And with each passing of these 100 yugas is this annihilation. Bhutagrama Saivaya. Bhutva Bhutva Praliyate. Ratrayagame Vashat Partha. Ahar Yad Brahmano is what we just said. Prabhavatya Haragame, also from the 8th chapter of Gita. Bhutagrama, the aggregate of living entities, they are repeatedly taking birth, they are repeatedly manifest and unmanifest at the end and beginning of each of Brahma's days and nights. Bhutagrama Saevaya, Bhutva Bhutva Praliyate. Again and again, Praliyate, destroyed with the oncoming, I said onslaught at first in my head. I suppose it is sort of an onslaught, destruction. Bhutva Bhutva Praliyate. Ratriyagame Vasha Partha. Vasha, Avasha, automatically. This is the nature of our vision, that when you don't have knowledge of what's happening, then you say, oh, it's automatic. You know, when you're a kid and your parent turns on the car, or now you have really fancy buttons, you just click the button and it turns on. How did the car turn on? Oh, automatically. Because you don't know the inner workings of the electronics. As far as we're concerned, it happened automatically. Behind the scenes, someone worked very hard, diligently, putting together the electronics, the mechanics, everything was very detailed, and they finally connected it to the fob. And when you push that button, it happens by a lot of effort. But from our point of view, avasha, automatic. So when you sort of zoom out and you see this Bhutva Bhutva Praliyate, this macrocosmic destruction and recreation, the Lord's energy is all at work. But from an ignorant point of view, oh, it's happening automatically. And from a super high Krishna conscious point from Krishna's side, it's happening automatically. He's not directly, Gopal's not down there toiling to make sure it happens again and again at the end of each day of Lord Brahma. He's playing his flute in Vrindavan. He's having a nice time with the coward Buddhists in Vrindavan. So from his side, avasha, it's automatic, and from the ignorant side, it's automatic. But for those of us who understand the workings behind it all, it's extremely complicated. The inner workings, with the agami, with the oncoming of ahar, prabhavati, again, this creation is taking place. So, people who don't have a conception of Krishna consciousness, people who are living their life based on sense gratification, a life, the irresponsible life of sense gratification was unknown to, anybody recognize that? I think it's in a purport. Let's find it. It's such a great quote. The irresponsible life of sense gratification. It's in the purport of Srimad Bhagawatam 1.5.24. The training was compulsory not only to create good citizens of the state, but also to prepare the boy's future for spiritual realization. The irresponsible life of sense enjoyment was unknown to the children of the followers of the Varnashram system. This is Navadwip with the Bhaktivedantas, and it's describing his submissive nature because he was submissive and not overly talkative. It's described. He was a sober boy, unusual in our modern context. But the irresponsible life of sense gratification was unknown to those who have a higher purpose. But what I was saying was that this irresponsible life led without any sense of spiritual responsibility leads one to this bhutva and prabhavati again and again in this cycle, back and forth, suffering like dogs. One time one man told Prabhupada, he said, well, if I have the body of a dog, then I'll have the mind of a dog, and I'll be happy as a dog. And Prabhupada said, if you want to be a dog, that is all right, but we do not think that is very nice. We do not think that is very nice. For someone who's very absorbed in sense gratification, that's the be-all, end-all. They don't want to be told that their sense gratification is maya, that it's suffering. They don't want to think about death. They want to, when the lion comes, the ostrich wants to bury its head in the sand. Maybe if I can't see it, it can't see me. But we don't think that's very nice. We like to open our eyes. We like to see reality. We like to see the beautiful form of Panchatattva, of Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. And even more important than seeing, we want to hear the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. All of our senses used in Krishna's service to become mad after Krishna, not to become mad after sense gratification. And by becoming mad after Krishna, then one doesn't have to see repeated birth and death. Adarshana, not adarshana, let there be every type of calamity for by vipada santutasha tatra tatra jaguru bhavato darshanam yatsya napunara bhavadarshanam. Because by seeing you, bhavato darshanam yatsya, when that is there, napunara bhavadarshanam, then we don't have to see this anymore. This repeated birth and death. Instead of seeing Krishna, we're just seeing this cycle. When Maruti learned the word cycle, he would use it a lot. Day and night, day and night. It's a cycle. And this cycle is taking place Our days and nights are small time. Brahma's days and nights, with it comes creation, prabhavati, and destruction, praliyati. This amazing, amazing process. And for those who don't have this vision, then they're simply whiling away their time, Prabhupada says in the purport. Whiling away their time. Everyone lives 100 years. I found that to be an interesting calculation because it's true of Kali Yuga. And from this chapter we learn that it's true of these various denizens of heaven up to Lord Brahma. Sahasra Yuga Paryantam, Ahar, no, there's another. Anyway, Brahma lives Shatam, 100, no, that's 1,000. Anyway, Brahma lives 100 of his years. But in the previous ages, Dvapara, especially Treta and Satya, it seemed like people were living a lot longer lives. And I don't know if in that calculation there's some way to calculate it that they're living 100 years, but the years are extended. But in any case, in Kali Yuga, the reference is applicable. We live about 100 years. Nowadays, even shorter. And in any case, what's the use of a long life if it's wasted? A tree, can live. These baobabs are living for thousands of years. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was 48 or some short amount of time. But the quality of that time was so well spent. My sister came and helped me yesterday, and one of the things she requested of me was, have respect for my time. Have respect for time. If you while away your time in sense gratification, then you miss the point. You miss an opportunity. This thing in my personal life, there are so many things that I wanted. Maybe not gross sense gratification. I wanted to be good at jiu-jitsu, wrestling. I wanted to be good at tennis. I wanted to enjoy surfing. I wanted to be good at chess. For some time I studied chess, and I got to a certain point where on the chess.com app I was in the top 1 percentile. I felt it, wow, we're making progress. If I study a little more, I could be a grandmaster. Maybe, if I really dedicated myself, I could be a super GM and compete with Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. It's ridiculous. You put all that attention to chess, your whole life becomes chess, chess, chess. And then you can't be a master surfer. You can't do both. You can be a good surfer and a good chess player, but you can't be the Kelly Slater and Magnus Carlsen. You can be a good jiu-jitsu practitioner and a good chess player and a good surfer, but you can't be Gracie and Kelly Slater and Magnus Carlsen. You can't be all these things. You're chasing will-o'-the-wisps. And even if you do become the greatest in any one of these regards, then you die. And what do you come back as? A dog? What was the use of that? It was this momentary sense gratification. Last night, if I be completely honest, I spent about 3 hours just sitting there dividing numbers by 7. No joke. I have all the notes on my phone. I sat there and I was amazed at the unlimitedly complex nature of the number 7 and how it divides so nicely. As you go up the numbers, they're very simple. 1 divided by 1, 1. 1 divided by 2 is now a half. So the number 2 will always be divisible either by itself or by a half. No matter what number you pick, 35, it's 17 and a half. You'll never get a third. And as you move up these numbers, there's similar patterns you'll see. With the number 3, there's only 2 possibilities besides a whole. It's either 0.33333 or 0.66666. And as you move up each number, there's similarly only the amount of possibilities below that number. 4, you get a quarter, a half, a third. 5, you get 2, 4, 6, 8. 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8. Anything you divide by 5, it'll either be a whole or it'll be one of those divisions. So then it becomes really easy to divide any number by 5. The remainder times 2 is the decimal. 36 divided by 5, 7, and then the remainder is 1 times 2. 0.2 is the decimal, 7.2. So you can calculate these things really easily. 6 becomes sort of a funky number. The numbers 2, 3, and 4 become very easy divided by 6, but 1 and 5 are a little tricky. Those ones reflect the number 3. They're also 0.33333 and 0.66666, but one number comes before. 1 divided by 6 is 0.1333, and 5 is 8.86666. 8 and 1, pretty magical numbers, adding up to 9. 9 is this, this sacred geometry sort of number. And when you look at the spirals of plants, different people study sacred geometry. If you zoom in on one aspect of it, it's very complicated. It's very uneven. If you look at one little kernel of a sunflower seed, the shape sometimes might even be twisted, might have flaws, and then you zoom out and you look at the swirl, and it becomes perfect. Then you zoom out further, and there's tapestry on the sunflower field, there's some problems. Zoom out further, and there's universal and planetary organization. It's this sort of flux, this vibration constantly of chaos and order. Chaos and order. If I tell you the number 0.142857, it sounds crazy. It's chaotic. But if I tell you that's 1 divided by 7, suddenly it's a very easy number to comprehend. And as I was dividing these numbers, 2 divided by 7, 3 divided by 7, 4 divided by 7, every single time it was the same 6 numbers, 142857. And you just flip the order. But it's always in that order. And it was total sense gratification. But I was loving it. And I sat there till midnight, just typing in these numbers and finding patterns. And as I found more patterns, the more exciting it became. And I went and grabbed Ananda and I said, look, 285714 divided by 7. Look at these numbers. And she just said, you sound crazy. You've become mad after sense gratification. You're a lunatic. But if you flip that and you come up to someone with that same enthusiasm, my dear sir, you are so intelligent. Now give up all of this nonsense and take to Krishna consciousness. So enthusiastic for Krishna, then it becomes something beautiful. Otherwise it just becomes this chaotic list of numbers, this chaotic list of skills, names on a paper that will all be forgotten. Who cares who the 8th president was? Who remembers who the 31st president was? At the time, it was a big deal. At the time, everyone knew his name. Here's something fascinating. 0.14. 14 divided by 7 is 2. 8 divided by 7 is 4. And the last set of numbers, 57. It's just 1 over 56, which is 8 times 7. Why is it 1 over? Why is there that chaos? And if you peel that number back, just 1, and you get it to be 56, and you divide that down, it's 42 times 2,551, which is a very large prime number. And anyway, Hare Krishna.
I have a question.
Yeah,
It's not numerically related.
Okay.
Is that okay?
that's okay.
So it says right up there, Brahma, the life of Brahma is very long. It expires in the course of time. Brahma is also afraid of his death, and thus he performs devotional service to the Lord, just to release himself from the clutches of
If you wait till the end of class, sometimes these things are addressed, and then you ask questions at the end, and then we discuss it.
Okay.
And maybe I won't address your particular point about it, but you can ask after. What I was going to say about that point is that my sister and I discussed this also last night, is that there are 4 types of people discussed who surrender to Krishna. And one of them is the materially distressed. And one of the material distresses we experience is this cycle of birth and death. Death is a sort of distress that we experience that we want to avoid. And so people who recognize that distress surrender to Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna. You just wanted me to stop talking about numbers.
Duh.
Lord Brahma lives for this times this times this. I feel like we're all about numbers. India has the most incredible system of numerical. Rad is actually, it's amazing, but yeah.
We do. I guess the reason I went on for so long about it was just to sort of find this, really to drive that post home of the chaotic nature, that there's chaos. When I say these numbers, your brain turns off. You become tired. For me, it's fascinating. You become tired. But in either case, it comes back to order. And your brain can accept 1/7. That's a nice number. That's something you can understand. You know, someone has 7 cookies. If I have 1, I have 1/7 of them. But when someone tells you you have 0.142857 of them, then it doesn't make sense anymore. But this sort of expansion and I just love this vibration of chaos and order, creation, destruction. Prabhavati praliyate. And this ultimately, whatever you study, down to its most minute particle, if you studied the number 7 and all of its derivatives and endlessly, and you knew it perfectly, the end conclusion would be Krishna. Anything you look at, if you study it to its ultimate form, it will be Krishna. The scientists will want you to divide it down to some binary zeros and ones. Reductionism, they want to reduce it ultimately to nothing. Close their eyes to reality. And we, down to the root source, Krishna. And so as I was looking at these numbers, I just became amazed that, sacred geometry and the perfection of creation, in spite of apparent flaws, is ultimately Krishna. But yeah, Brahma is experiencing this fear of death. And anyone who experiences financial destitution, material difficulties, some inquisitive nature, they have some questions. You see the devotees on Harinam, oh, what are you guys doing? Inquisitive. But ultimately, Krishna says the real value is derived by the jnani, by the one who's in search of knowledge. Because the one who's in search of knowledge, when he discovers that bhutva praliyate, that this place is getting destroyed again and again, he wants to know more about this place and if there's an alternative. And it just happens that there is an alternative. Vyakto vyakta sanatana, a place that's eternal above this manifest and unmanifest nature. Parastasmatu bhavonyo vyakto vyakta sanatana. Above this inferior nature is my eternal spiritual kingdom, which isn't subjected to this creation and destruction. It's sanatana, it's eternal. And that's the desired destination, whatever the case may be. Whether you have no material desires, all material desires, or desires for liberation, you should worship Krishna. And the end result of worshiping Krishna is that all of those things will fall away and the only thing left will be Krishna. No more will we experience suffering. But even more importantly than not experiencing suffering is that we will have a desire to serve Krishna, the positive side of the spectrum. Any questions? What would you
The
like?
question was, he performs devotional service to Lord Brahma just to release himself from the clutches of illusory energy. So there's no love for Krishna indicated in that sentence, and here he is, Lord Brahma.
The point being is that you have to come to the next stage of love of Krishna. And obviously there's love of Krishna. He has tears in his eyes when he's in Bhagawatam, when you hear the description of Brahma, like syringes, tears are flying from all 8 of his eyes. It starts from a certain, you have to start somewhere. And that's another thing my sister and I were talking about, is that, okay, you're financially impoverished, and so you pray to God. But if that's your end platform, if that's where you stop, then if you get money, then you'll stop praying to God. That's it. I was praying to God for money, I got the money, my transaction with God is completed, pull out my ATM, we're good to go. But if you start praying to God because you're financially impoverished, and then you develop a taste for devotional service, then even when you get money, you use that money for God. So Brahma's afraid of death, he's praying to God, and when he gets the understanding of how to create, how to do everything, he continues to worship Krishna, he continues to serve God. And he's the head of our sampradaya. There was a really interesting incident in Mayapur when I was assisting my spiritual master in the Vanaprastha Pravesh ceremony of His Grace Jai Gaur Sundar Prabhu and Kamodaki Mataji, which is very nice because the Vanaprastha ashram is sort of the hidden ashram in our movement. You know, we understand Grahastha and we have a few sannyasis, but who's renouncing Panchashodvam Dvanam Vraje? And so my spiritual master sent me to Bhaktividya Purna Maharaj to inquire about some of the practices of Varnashram, of Vanaprastha. Is it an initiation? Is it just a Pravesh ceremony with the fire yajna? What is the precedent for it in devotional practices? Different things. And one of the things that Bhaktividya Purna Maharaj began talking to me about was the is it Satyavrata? Who was it who was told he should get married? He didn't feel a need to get married, but he was told by Manu and by Lord Brahma to get married. I think it was Satyavrata. Anyway, whoever it was. And I remembered hearing a class by my spiritual master about that topic. And he humorously was talking about, GBC intervention. You have some fired up brahmachari kid who's like really paving the way, and then the temple president or someone says, I think you should get married or something. Or it was in the context, it was humorously stated that he was induced by Lord Brahma, although maybe he didn't need to. And so I started to mention that to Bhaktividya Purna Maharaj, that, he was induced by Lord Brahma. But I said it sort of offhandedly. And Bhaktividya Purna Maharaj turned very sober. And he said, do you want me to slap you upside the face? Show a little respect. That's the head of our sampradaya. And it took me out of, I was a little bit in my head. I was taking it casually. My spiritual master's point, in the certain context, it was humorously stated. That okay, maybe he didn't need to get married, but he was induced by Lord Brahma. And he compared it to some instances we've seen in our institution. But if one stops there and now every time he hears this pastime, he just sort of laughs it off and says, Brahma induced him, then you forget. If every time you hear about Brahma, you think, he was Brahma Vimohan, he totally spaced out and offended Krishna, or he chased his daughter, he's this, he's that. Every time you hear about Indra, you think, he's just a lusty demigod. Then you miss the point. You miss how powerful they are in devotional service. You miss how much respect we can show for them as Brahma, as the head of our sampradaya, Indra as a great Vaishnava devotee. That's why part of our play for Govardhan Puja was first the Narada search for the greatest devotee, and Indra's on that list. Before we smash him down and say what a crummy dude he was for trying to destroy Vrindavan, let's first recognize his position as a great devotee. And I think that practice should be done even on a small scale we should all be like bees looking for the honey with all devotees, because the fact is that everyone in this temple, everyone who comes to Krishna consciousness, even as a visitor, everyone who chants Hare Krishna just once, has taken their glance off material energy, even if for but a moment, to look towards Krishna, to move away from the temporary, go toward the permanent, move away from the darkness, move toward the light. And this is to be appreciated. This is to be respected. Brahma's not just fearful of death. There's a lot more. Maharaj.
Srila Prabhupada is paraphrasing the Bhagavatam verse with which Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur begins his commentary on this verse.
Is it Ayu Harati?
Yep.
No, okay, never mind. I was reading that one, that with, the whole, the bellows and the blacksmith and all this. Alright, yes, Maharaj.
This is Brahma speaking.
Hmm.
This is what Srila Prabhupada is paraphrasing. I feared time, even though I am situated in Brahmaloka, which is offered respects by all planets, and desiring to bring time under control, I performed many sacrifices. Now, in pure bhakti, I offer my respects to the Supreme Lord, the controller of sacrifices. So this is Brahma's own admission. I'm a mortal being. Naturally, I fear time. So for us to acknowledge that, that's not denigrating at all.
Wonderful point and wonderful verse. And and there is that wrapper on the end of the verse is, I'm offering obeisances to Krishna. I offer obeisances to, even like when we worship the demigods, Katyayani, all these things, I'm worshipping Katyayani to get Krishna as my husband. In Brahma Samhita, the prayer to Ganesh is there. He's putting his tumuli on the lotus feet of Govinda to get the power to remove obstacles. Everything is coming from Krishna. And when we recognize that, when we appreciate that. Sure.
Well, that's what I thought was cool when you said when you zoom in, you see Krishna into the number, but when you zoom out, too, planets are all going perfectly. Everything that Krishna does is perfectly numerical. And that's why Prabhupada said we need organization as well as intelligence.
Yeah.
So everything here is perfect, zoomed in, and as far zoomed out as you can.
Yeah.
So funny that you spent time with numbers. I decided to divide my 100 years of life. I was like, 100 years? That's so okay, 100, it could, when you're a kid, you're like, 100 years is a long time. And I was like, if I want to be good at playing harmonium or dunga or whatever, if I actually want to start studying those things, how long is that going to take me, And some people say, oh, it takes 12 years. Yeah, well, how long that 12 years? Whatever amount of time I'm sleeping or this or that. So I divided maybe a solid 30 years. And I divided that into days. I divided that into hours. And I was like, I only have a certain amount of hours left. And I don't remember now because it was last week. But I was like, that's pretty wild. I only have this amount of hours left in my life, right? So how am I going to use those hours? And I decided to get really organized. I was like, how much hours will I use to sleep? How many hours can I do? And things take you out of that. Maybe you have to drive a friend to a hospital. Maybe you have to do this or that. And things will disrupt you. But you can always get back to, your
all of
schedule
those
and
are the
schedule
little,
those things too.
all of those are the little kernels of the sunflower seed that are a little warped and different. The driving a friend to the hospital. But when you zoom out, that spiral is still there. If you're, in general, following your key. And that was Anand Tirtha Maharaj he does these little YouTube videos, and one of them, he has two actors, two devotees, playing the roles of this one guy criticizing the other guy for smoking cigarettes. And he calculates how many packs of cigarettes this guy has bought over the course of 20 years. And by the time he comes up with a number, he says, just see, if you hadn't been smoking for 20 years, you could have bought yourself a Lamborghini. And the other guy says, do you smoke? He says, no. He says, where's your Lamborghini? And Anand Tirtha Maharaj's point is that you need to have that goal. It's not just saying, okay, I'm not going to smoke, I'm not going to do this, I'm not that, I'm not that. Brahmacharya doesn't mean I'm not going to associate with women. Brahma charati iti brahmacharya. It means you're moving towards Brahman. Charati, moving towards Brahman. That's what it means. So everything, Hare Krishna, welcome. So everything that we're doing, it's planned out. You're charting your time. How am I going to use my time wisely in Krishna service? Abhyartha Kalatvam. One of the symptoms of advancement in devotional service is that you don't waste time. Is that you spend each moment in Krishna consciousness. Nice, really nice one. Yeah.
It's also described somewhere how, even in teaching grammar, everything was Krishna related. So how does that relate with teaching ABCs, or how is it all related to Krishna? How would that be?
It takes one's own expertise, and there's not one way to do it. It's not that, hey, this is how you teach the ABCs Krishna consciously. I mean, you can come up with so many different ways. Krishna says, like akshaja, beyond sense perception means adho, how is it? Adho akshaja jnana. Anyway, from a to ksha is the alphabet, and Krishna is beyond that alphabet. So there's so many ways you can mention Krishna in the scope of the alphabet. There's so many ways. Even in the 10th chapter Gita, there's a nod to grammar. That Krishna is the most basic compound, the dvandva compound. I'm trying to remember the verse. But yeah, so there's ways of giving nods to spiritual life as you talk about ABCs. And that's up to you how you want to do that. Whether A represents, something spiritual. It's just like in elementary school, and we all had in our classrooms, that little strip at the top of the building where A is for apple, B is for bat, C is for cat, whatever, and it goes around. I mean, it's even as simple as that. Instead of A is for that, you can have A is for Arundhati, or, I'm sorry, that's an odd example. What's a more common A word? A is for Arati. A is for Arti. You perform Arti for Krishna. B is for Balaram. So in that way, C is for Chaitanya. In that way, you can find, there's unlimited application. All of the permutations of how we apply our lives, apply Krishna in our lives, it's unlimited. And the original explanation, the original stepping stone to describe your entry level is that universal form. When we hear about that in Srimad Bhagawatam, it's like, okay, you can't understand who Krishna is, but you understand that something is greater than yourself. When you see the mountains, they're great. You're small, they're big. Well, here, these are the bones of the Lord. The clouds, wow, they're so high. You can fly through them in a plane, but they're out of reach. This is the hair of the Lord. The sun and the moon, these celestial firmaments, so powerful and bright in the sky. These are the eyes of the Lord. If He doesn't see, you don't see. If the sun goes down, you're blind. So it's this sort of introductory level, and then as you go on, it becomes more and more personal. Jiva Goswami's grammar starts off Narayana Udbhutoyam Varna Krama. All of this Varna Krama, this phonetic alphabet, has been spoken, is coming from Narayana. And then as you dive into it, first you get, Samgya Prakarana, the names. Everything is named. And okay, it might not be, it's a little bit personal, you're getting the names of the Lord, and then the interactions. And as Jiva Goswami goes on, different pastimes come out, different stories come out. And he's just talking about grammar. But as you're going through the grammar, everything has a name. Now Visarga is Vishnu Sarga. And now sometimes when you see Vishnu Sargas in a verse, it might directly relate to topics of Vishnu. And suddenly your whole life is wrapped around Krishna. And you're getting all excited about how these two things relate, and this relates. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is tasting the prasadam, he's not just saying, oh, rasgulla, very tasty. He's tasting that prasadam, and then he's thinking, this prasadam was touched by the lips of Krishna. Krishna put the flute to his mouth. That flute was, and in this way his meditation regressed from prasadam to a Krishna conscious absorption into the pastimes of Krishna. Should we take a quick look at that? It's in CC. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is taking prasadam, and it just, anyway, we can discuss it over prasadam. How about that? It's time for prasadam. As we honor prasadam, we can discuss Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's honor of prasadam.